The sky over the Loire Valley was the color of bruised steel when the sirens began to howl. Manuel Garcia felt the vibration of the blast before the sound reached him, an obscene ripple that rolled through the burned-out town like a dying heartbeat. Windows shattered inward. Dust puffed from mortar lines. Somewhere to the west, a mushroom of incandescent sand and pulverized stone clawed into the clouds, lit from beneath by a light too white to look at. For a heartbeat, the horizon became a second sunrise, then the world snapped back to twilight, and all that remained was the slow black ribbon of smoke winding toward heaven. Manuel had been suturing the torn scalp of a child in the makeshift clinic that once had been an elementary school. The girl's hair was matted with dried blood. She did not scream. Most of the children had long since run out of screams, and Manuel's own nerves were strung so tight they had begun to feel like wire. Still, his hand hesitated when the tremor shuddered through the floorboards. The needle wagged in the air, suspended between one stitch and the next. Then the roof groaned, rafters sifting grit like dying snow, and 1,000 half-remembered surgical instincts wrested control of him again. Finish the suture. Clear the airway. Stop the bleeding. He made himself tie the knot. Outside, a second roar rolled across the fields. The breeze carried the copper tang of ionized air and something else, an acrid, metallic sweetness he recognized from the emergency rooms of his residency in Madrid when someone had cracked open a canister of ethylene oxide by mistake. He registered the smell the way a soldier registers the whistle of artillery, proof that the real damage was yet to come. The townsfolk poured into the gravel street in a panic of whispers. They turned west, toward the Rigny Atomic Depot, though every map printed after 2030 had erased that grim little installation. For 2 decades, the warlords had bickered over its perimeter fencing, their mercenaries exchanging drone fire in the wheat fields. Now, it seemed, one of the depot's forgotten warheads had found the exact combination of neglect, greed, and luck required to detonate. Manuel told himself to breathe. Radiation protocols, decontamination, but that was a dream from a saner century. The clinic possessed no Geiger counter, no potassium iodide, no proper lead shielding, only scavenged antibiotics stashed in a pharmacy cabinet and a dwindling pile of bandages. The room around him felt suddenly as fragile as the child beneath his hands. He looked down at her. "Done," he whispered in Spanish. The girl's eyes fluttered open. She tried to smile, failed, then reached up and clutched the soft rabbit sewn from denim scraps that served as her talisman in this charred miracle of survival. Manuel stood and peeled off his gloves. The latex was so thin it tore at the wrist, hanging like shed snakeskin. He imagined the gamma rays hitching a ride on every dust mote in the room, worming into bone marrow, rewriting futures. In the hush that followed, a single thought pierced him like an arterial line. We need proper medicine. Not the expired stuff bartered from smugglers, not the homebrewed tinctures. Real antivirals, marrow stimulants, chelators. Germany, rumor said, still manufactured doses in limited quantities for its puppet hospitals. One train every 12 days crawled from the ruins of Munich to the shadow parliament in Dresden, its refrigerated cars bristling with rifles and hope. Someone had to reach that train. When he found his voice, it cracked with purpose. "Get the town council," he told a volunteer nurse. "Tell them I'll speak at dusk." His fingers were already trembling with plans, measuring routes along half-bombed highways, calculating how many vials of filgrastim a human soul was worth. He could feel the story rising in him, an adventure he had never asked for but could no longer refuse. They met in the broken nave of St. Martin's, candles guttering on cracked tile, the stained glass saints long since reduced to confetti by shellfire. Manuel did not begin with stirring rhetoric. He began with numbers, the blast radius, the likely isotopes, the hematologic half-lives. He outlined the symptoms that would appear in hours: nausea, vomiting, the first strands of hair curling loose like burnt grass. He spoke with the flat certainty of a man dictating a patient's time of death, and the crowd of farmers, scavengers, and long-armed teenagers clutching rusted Kalashnikovs leaned forward as if the diagnosis concerned each of their private hearts. "We can wait to bury our children," Manuel said finally, "or we can steal the drug that keeps them alive." He sketched the railway grid in chalk on a slate. "We will need diesel, water, a map of the minefields along the Moselle. And we need 6 volunteers." His gaze swept the pews. 6. No more. For a moment, no one moved. Then a wiry woman named Elodie, once a physics teacher, now the most feared sharpshooter in the valley, nodded. "I'll go," she said. A one-eyed mechanic called Renard grunted assent, itching the stump where his left hand had been. 3 others stood. A shepherd who had lost his flock to marauders, a hacker who carried the last functioning laptop in 4 provinces, a mute refugee boy whose loyalty was proven every dawn by the small fires he lit under the clinic's kettles. And last, because silence felt like complicity, the town mayor himself, Jean-Luc Besson, caretaker of broken oaths. 6. Manuel felt an ache in his sternum, as if his heart had swelled too large for the cage of his ribs. "Then we leave at first light." Someone in the back, drunk on fear, called out, "What makes you our savior, Doctor?" Manuel did not answer. He merely turned and pointed to the window behind the altar, where the plume from the depot was still climbing the sky, a black beanstalk sprouting from a graveyard. In its stem pulsed a secret light, faint yet terrible, as if the sun had become a heart willing itself to stop beating. Dawn was a thin gray bruise when the expedition rolled out of town in a requisitioned medical truck scarred by shrapnel. They called the vehicle Esperanza because naming a thing after hope lent it armor. Renard drove, steering one-handed while the hacker mapped radiation plumes on her laptop, cannibalizing the battery from an old pacemaker to keep the screen alive. Manuel sat in the back among crates of gauze and faded labels, rereading a folded dossier on the German pharmalabs. The printed letters had begun to smear from months of sweat and rain, yet their promise still burned. Filgrastim 4, Lot E71, cryostable to -40, maximum shelf life 2 years, embargoed for military hospitals only. They crossed the Loire, its waters scummed with algae and drifting ash, then slipped onto the autoroute toward Orleans. Along the shoulder rose the skeletal remains of billboards that once advertised splendors of the old world. Audiobooks, full-length bestsellers streaming to earbuds, self-driving cars with gull-wing doors, influencer getaways in Maldives reefs now drowned beneath acid tides. Manuel wondered if the corporations that dreamt those futures had ever imagined this one. The first encounter came outside tours. 2 pickup trucks blocked the road, tires gutted, tailgates welded into gun mounts. Jagged silhouettes crouched behind sheet metal shields. Elodie hissed between her teeth and thumbed the safety off her Dragunov. Manuel peeked through the slats and glimpsed graffiti sprayed across the barricade. "Children of the Cinder, trespass and ashes will be your dowry." The radiation cults had arrived ahead of them, worshipping fallout like a vengeful god. Renard downshifted. "We could turn east," he muttered. "No," Manuel said. "We lose a day skirting them. The marrow won't wait." He pushed open the rear door and stepped onto the pavement, stethoscope gleaming like a noose around his collar. The cultists' rifles tracked him. He lifted his palms, showing empty hands. A leader emerged, face cracked with burns, eyes flashing the fever of devotion. Around his neck hung dog tags, dozens of them, each etched with a different saint's name. He regarded Manuel with the patient contempt of a collector assessing a counterfeit coin. "We have wounded," Manuel said in French. "Children, radiation poisoning. Let us pass." The leader smiled and tapped the cylinder of a portable dosimeter clipped to his belt. "We have the wound and the cure," he said. "The fire is the cure. Why rob heaven of its harvest?" Inside Manuel something ancient snapped, a suture torn by strain. "Because heaven doesn't bury children," he answered. "Men do." The cultist's smile failed. He raised a hand, his followers leveled their guns. Manuel inhaled slowly, tasting the metallic hush before slaughter. But then Elodie's rifle cracked, one shot, precise, severing the dosimeter's clip. The cylinder clinked to the asphalt and rolled, blinking red. The cultist startled. Manuel seized the instant. "We leave," he said, voice low but flint hard. "Or your next wound will be the one you wanted." Silence held its breath. Then the leader jerked his chin, and the trucks reversed, engines coughing. The barricade parted just enough for Esperanza to squeeze through. As they rolled on, Manuel felt Elodie's gaze on the back of his skull, weighing the doctor she thought she knew against the man who had just threatened murder. He stared at the road until the horizon blurred, and promised himself the marrow was still worth whatever darkness he had swallowed. Night along the Seine tasted of rust and unburied grief. They bivouacked beneath the skeletal arch of a bridge where cables dangled like snapped violin strings, and the hacker tuned her laptop's weak transmitter to fish for military chatter. Across the embers, the shepherd recited psalms in Occitan, while the mayor scribbled ration math in a ledger, scratching out calories like sins. Renard poured engine oil through a coffee filter, the fluid glugging like black wine. Above them, the stars flickered, but Manuel could no longer tell which were satellites dying their final orbits, and which were skyholes burned by last year's tactical nukes. Sleep was rationed in 90-minute turns. Yet Manuel drifted only into restless surface dreams. His wife in Seville, reading bedtime stories listed once on streaming sites under tags like Audiobook Fantasy and Audiobook for Sleep, her voice rising and falling while their daughter traced the outlines of dragons on a cracked tablet screen. In the dream, the tablet shattered again and again, and each time his wife caught the shards with bleeding hands, whispering, "Shoo, love, soon the war will end. Soon this will all be nothing but a better than the movie's audiobook we laugh about." But when Manuel tried to touch her, the distance between them elongated into a corridor cluttered with empty four poles, and the radiation plume billowed through every doorway, hungry as night. He woke before dawn, dew welding his hair to his temples. For a moment he did not know who he was, or why his hands ached. Then Esperanza's shadow loomed against the scarlet horizon, and he remembered. The depot, the marrow, the train. He buried his head in his knees and breathed until he could stand. At Rouen they encountered the occupation troops for the first time. Russian mercenaries repurposed as border police, their insignia scrubbed but not forgotten. Checkpoints bloomed like metastases across the boulevards. Concrete cubes strung with razor wire and red velvet banners proclaiming unity through order. Manuel swallowed bile. Unity hurt the same on every tongue, he thought, whether it ended in Zenchina or Liberté. The convoy adopted the guise of a Red Crescent relief unit. Hackware forged on the hacker's laptop replicated digital stamps, QR codes, even pharmacological clearance lists. Manuel donned his last unbloodied coat, the white fabric yellowing at the cuffs, and rehearsed the liturgy of medical jargon. Fear sharpened his diction. At the guard post, spotlights lanced across the windshield. An officer with cigar smoke curling from his teeth demanded export papers. Manuel leaned out, clipboard trembling purposely. Quarantine waivers for Marseille. We're late to the southern corridor. He tapped the forged QR. The manifest lists pediatric antivirals. Open the truck and the cold chain fails in under 3 minutes. The officer grunted, mistrustful. He circled the vehicle thrice, tripping over a bundle of spent shell casings. Inside the cabin, Renard drummed the steering wheel. Elodie kept her rifle angled low, hidden beneath an old blanket. The seconds dripped like morphine. Finally, the officer stamped the screen with a greasy thumbprint. Go! Esperanza rolled forward, tires slapping the iron teeth of the checkpoint. Manuel exhaled a knot of months. Behind them, a soldier unspooled barbed tape, blocking the lane again. The road to Germany lay open, yet every mile from here grew more dangerous, patrolled both by mercenary drones and the scavenger gangs starving at their margins. And still the plume from the depot stalked them, an unseen wolf loping at their backs. They reached the Ardennes under a sky the color of cauterized flesh. Here the war had eaten whole villages, leaving nothing but foundations and ghost roads that wound through forests now silent of birds. The hacker's laptop died. No more batteries. Paper maps returned to Dominion, flapping across the dashboard. Twice they detoured around craters where small, low-yield warheads had scorched the clay into green glass. Each time Renard pressed a fist to his mouth, whispering the only prayer he knew. It was noon when Elodie shouted and pointed north. A black convoy crawling the ridgeline. For APCs, a flatbed truck bearing the sigil of the occupation ministry, and 15 soldiers in matte helmets jogging alongside. The Dresden train, Manuel knew, would pass near the border town of Beach within 30 hours. If the ministry had heard rumors of Filgrastim shipments, they would guard that line like the last pulse of empire. Renard ground the gears, pulling Esperanza into the shadow of a sunken barn. The group huddled inside, lungs steaming in cold dust. Manuel ran odds in his head. To fight was madness. To flee ceded the marrow to tyranny. But there was a third path, born in operating rooms where seconds mattered more than virtue. Go in quiet, slice only what you must, exit before the hemorrhage begins. The train yard's perimeter sensors are motion-based. The hacker murmured, recalling scraps of code from stolen schematics. We need a dead zone. Manuel scanned the barn, rank with mold, buzzing with ticks, until his gaze landed on rolls of chicken wire tangled under a broken plow. We can build Faraday cocoons, he said. Wrap ourselves, crawl under the fence. He met Shepard's wary eyes. I've patched intestines with less. That night, they stripped the insulation from Esperanza's wiring and braided it with the chicken mesh, fashioning crude cloaks of copper thread. The mayor joked that they looked like medieval penitents. Manuel did not laugh. He slid a hypodermic beneath his coat, prayer and weapon alike. When the moon rose, they trekked east toward beach, each step crunching frost that glowed foxfire blue in the starlight. Manuel recited the dosage calculations under his breath. 5 milligrams per kilogram, twice daily, and imagined the clinic's hallway flooded with 4 stands, the children's veins humming awake like dormant orchards. He pictured playing the recording of an audiobook sci-fi story to lull them while the cytokines rebuilt their blood, and hearing at last the hush of a ward that dared again to dream. Ahead, the iron lattice of the rail fence materialized, lit by sensor LEDs winking red at 3-second intervals. Manuel drew the mesh cloak over his shoulders. His heartbeat thrummed so loudly he feared the sensors might detect the sound alone. They crawled. Time dissolved into the rasp of breath against frozen mud. LEDs blinked overhead, crimson, 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 then passed on to scan a farther patch of earth. Beneath the wire, Manuel felt the world's weight compress his lungs. He recalled the first time he squeezed a beating heart between gloved palms, willing it to pump, and realized this crawl was the same gesture inverted. He, the heart, pressing himself deeper, stalling death for one more beat. They surfaced inside the perimeter, knees soaked. 50 meters away, the flat cars waited, canopies zipped shut against the cold. An armed patrol marched the siding in lazy loops. Manuel motioned the others toward a stack of steel crates, then slithered forward alone. The filgrastim was stored in cryopods, each the size of a carry-on suitcase, lids keyed to biometric locks. Manuel slipped the hypodermic from his coat, pricked his thumb, and smeared blood across the scanner. It hissed green. The pod unclamped, exhaling vapor that smelled of hospital corridors and salvation. Inside nested 32 vials, their labels unblemished by war. He lifted one. It trembled between his fingers. For that instant, the depot's plume, the children of the cinder, the checkpoint officers, everything retreated to a silent orbit. This vial was the center. Gravity reversed itself around the possibility of survival. A shout cut the air. Patrolmen had spotted the Shepherd darting across the tracks. Gunfire spat sparks off rail ties. Manuel's mind snapped from awe to triage. He slammed the pod shut, heaved it onto his back, and bolted toward the fence. 3 shots ricocheted. The hacker sliced the padlock on a service gate. Elodie's rifle coughed reply. The mayor hauled Renard's collar as the mechanic stumbled. They burst into the tree lane where Esperanza waited, engine idling like a captive bird. Tires skidded, mud fountained, and the truck launched into the road. Bullets stitched the tailgate. Manuel braced his body over the pod, shielding glass with flesh. The night behind them filled with alarms, but distance thickened, the sound thinned, and soon only wind hammered the canvas tarp. In the cargo bay, the Shepherd clutched his side, crimson-soaking wool. Manuel tore open bandages, thoughts racing along clinical rails. Entry wound low, likely missed the liver, compress arterial bleeding. There was no anesthesia. When the Shepherd screamed, Manuel whispered the only lie a battlefield surgeon may tell. Almost there, almost home. Under his breath he added another vow, one he feared no prayer could keep. That this cure they'd stolen, this fragile promise bred in laboratories happier than any place left on Earth, would not be the prelude to greater horror, that the marrow's gift would not become merely one more ransom demanded by men who trafficked in suffering. Yet he knew tyrannies did not fear medicine so much as they feared the hope medicine inspired. And in that terror lay a lever Manuel would learn to wield. Dawn bled over the Vosges when the mileage dial clicked past the halfway mark to France. Manuel sat in the dim of the cargo hold, needle stitching the shepherd's torn flank. The filgrastim pod pressed his spine. He felt its chill radiate through fabric, a heartbeat of ice. Outside, Renard sang softly, an old ballad turned lullaby, while a Lodi kept watch through the shattered side mirror. None of them spoke of what came next. The inevitable pursuit, the reprisals the occupation would unleash on St. Martin's for this theft. But Manuel's thoughts spiraled forward anyway, taking the marrow's arrival as premise, not epilogue. He pictured the clinic buzzing, children's marrow regenerating, farmers rising from makeshift beds. He imagined that raw vitality turning outward, refusing to bend again beneath puppets and warlords. He envisioned a mutiny of healing, resistance seated in every recovered cell, a frontier where medicine itself became a weapon sharper than bullets. In that fragile quiet, he allowed himself a single, dangerous confession. This journey had already outgrown its goal. The warhead's cloud proved how swiftly death could travel. The filgrastim would prove how stubborn life could be in reply. The world might go on fracturing, but somewhere in those cracks he would plant a flag of veins and white blood cells and call it freedom. For the first time since the depot exploded, Manuel smiled, though tears blurred the rim of his vision. The smile felt like treason against despair. Somewhere on the horizon, rail tracks shimmered, waiting for the next train to ferry more serum into Empire's vaults. Manuel closed his eyes and gave the horizon a silent oath. Not while I breathe. And breathing, for now, was something he still knew how to do. The filtration tower that marked the edge of St. Martin's loomed against the pewter dawn like a rusted metronome, ticking in silence. Manuel felt Esperance's engine shudder beneath his feet as Renard killed the ignition a kilometer out. They would roll the last stretch downhill to keep the smoke off drones. All night the radio had hissed with bad news. Checkpoints tightened on every east-west road, search grids expanding like bruise rings across the map. Somewhere behind them armored vehicles prowled, hunting for the stolen pod. He pictured the filgrastim chilled inside its carbon shell, beating its own faint frost pulse, and understood that life itself had become contraband. They coasted through orchards where the apple trees stood black and skeletal, branches fused into glassy lumps by stray neutrons. A fox watched them pass, hairless and ghost-thin, eyes shining the sick amber of cesium sores. Manuel's heart jackhammered against his ribs, stoked by equal parts exhaustion and dread. The shepherd slept fitfully on the floor, bandages seeping through the gauze. Each jolt in the road summoned a hiss of pain. But they made it, tires crunching to a halt behind the clinic's fractured wall just as the first pink blade of sunrise split the horizon. Inside, silence reigned. Too much silence. The girl with the denim rabbit lay where Manuel had left her, feverish splotches blooming on cheeks like fire opal petals. 27 children occupied cots scavenged from bombed summer camps, bones trembling under skin translucent as rice paper. Their parents hovered like spirits, lips chewed to raw nubs. Hope and fear fused in every gaze that swung toward Manuel the instant he lugged the cryopod across the threshold. He remembered an attending once telling him that healing was 90% theater. Convince the patient the cure is coming and the body does half the work. Today, theater became revolution. He slammed the pod on a table, vapor spilling in dragon tendrils, and announced so every wall could testify, filgrastim has arrived. Tonight, bone marrows bloom. Gasped. Someone sobbed, sharp and incredulous, like a man discovering water after 3 days in the desert. Manuel broke the seal. Vials winked under the clinic's sole unbroken fluorescent tube. He felt the room lean forward as though the glass possessed gravitational pull. No time for speeches, Manuel said. Renard, generators. Hacker, temperature log every hour. Elodie, door security. We have 12 hours until the occupation realizes we outran them. He did not need to add what would happen then. Everyone knew. They worked the way angels might assemble wings if God handed them only scavenged tape and a prayer. For lines were fashioned from aquarium tubing, saline bags from surgical gloves, syringe barrels sterilized in boiling vinegar. Manuel calculated dosing volumes by eye, 5 milligrams times approximate body weight, minus 20% for malnutrition, minus another 10 for marrow suppression already in progress. He administered the first injection into the girl's thigh, whispering the litany he'd built to keep panic from paralyzing his fingers. Clara, you'll be tired, but that's the medicine teaching your bones. Dream something wondrous, perhaps dragons from an audiobook fantasy you once loved. Clara squeezed his wrist. Will it hurt? Yes, he admitted. But hurt is proof your blood is coming home. Outside, Elodie posted sentries with hunting rifles and the one thermal scope still working. The shepherd, now elevated by morphine and stubborn piety, hummed psalms through cracked lips while the mayor hammered planks across blown-out windows. The hacker hijacked a defunct weather satellite dish to scour airwaves. At noon, she intercepted encrypted chatter. A penal battalion inbound from Rennes, orders to extract strategic biologic assets and neutralize civilian shelters arguing possession. Neutralize. Renard spat oil-black saliva. That means burn everyone and fetch the ashes. Manuel watched children twitch in uneasy sleep, white blood cells stirring like tiny insurgents inside them. He turned to his companions. We have less than half a day to turn this town into a fortress. Or a beacon, the hacker said softly, spinning her laptop toward him. On-screen flickered a mock-up of a pirate broadcast. The clinic's coat of arms crudely overlaid on a map, coordinates pulsing. She grinned with a manic flame. We hijack the old number station in Montserrat. We tell every village east of the Charente what we've done. Tell them the puppet government is coming for their children's medicine. Fear travels fast, doctor, but anger flows even faster on shortwave. Manuel weighed the idea. A broadcast could summon allies or paint an even larger target on their backs. But then he remembered the rifle-scarred billboards on the autoroute and how, before war devoured trust, people spent nights streaming audiobooks, full-length bestsellers because stories made them feel less alone. Stories still wielded power, only the medium shifted from silicon to static. Do it, he said. Renard and I will rig an amplifier once we salvage copper from the school's chemistry lab. Elodie's smile held no mirth. So we fight propaganda with prophecy. Exactly, Manuel whispered. Let's prophesy survival. By dusk, the broadcast tower rose like a skeletal finger above the clinic's roof, jury-rigged from conduit pipes and a repurposed four-stand. The hacker looped a message every 90 seconds in French, Spanish, and garbled German. We have stolen Filgrastim. We are treating radiation victims at St. Martin's schoolhouse. The occupation will annihilate us by dawn. If you believe blood belongs to the living, come stand with us, or be ready to shelter those who carry the cure farther on. Between each iteration, Manuel's recorded voice bled through transistor fuzz, calm as a surgeon announcing vitals in an emergency ward. Elodie listened once, shrugged. You sound like you're selling salvation at a half-price bazaar. No, Manuel replied, throat raw. Salvation's free. Courage we charge at cost. The children's fevers broke shortly before midnight. First Clara, then two others whose skin flushed healthy coral under flashlight beams. Manuel felt his chest expand painfully with mixture of triumph and terror. Triumph because the drug worked, terror because time had run out. An hour later, the horizon bloomed with headlights, dozens of them, serpentining down the valley road. But instead of armored carriers, battered farm trucks rumbled into town. Crews of miners from Saumur, vineyard workers from the lower banks, disbanded fire brigades wielding axes like pikes. Many bore little more than hunting shotguns or welding torches. At their front drove a hulking reaper machine welded into a mobile barricade, its harvester blades honed to war spears. Someone had painted across its flanks in bright graffiti, "Audiobook Apocalypse? No living epic." The refuseniks of the valley had heard the call. For a heartbeat, Manuel tasted the first note of something that felt like destiny, a chord struck in bone. But joy wilted watching their odds. Maybe 100 volunteers against a regiment of disciplined killers arriving by sunrise. Medicine alone could not shield the living. They needed a plan brutal enough to buy hours without bleeding the uprising dry. He gathered the ad hoc captains in the ruined nave and sketched the clinic grounds on dirty linoleum. "We don't hold the building," he said, pointing to concentric circles. "We hold the radius, force them to fight for every meter, then retreat street by street. Chew them until their flanks buckle, then collapse on the survivors." "A lure," Elodie translated, racking her rifle. "We turn St. Martin's into a mouth." "Exactly, and its teeth are ambition." Manuel lifted a canister of chlorine scavenged from the school pool. "Medical gas and improvised claymores. I'll handle the chem rig. Renard, dig choke points. Shepard, coordinate lookouts. Hacker, jam their comms once they breach town perimeter. Feed them loops of pre-war pop hits or, better, a bedtime snippet of some audiobook for sleep until they choke on the lullaby." The hacker grinned. "Stephen Hawking on black holes, perhaps. Let them contemplate the void." Manuel laid the filgrastim pod at the map center. "If the line breaks, fallback group smuggles this south. No heroes dying for treasure. Our only victory is persistence." Outside, torches flickered along barricades. Children too weak to fight pressed their faces to slats, whispering thanks as volunteers passed. And in each whispered thanks, Manuel felt a new weight settle into his sinews. These people were no longer patients. They were comrades, believing their pulse could recalibrate history. Dawn detonated in artillery flares. Occupation troops opened with thermobaric shells to ripple masonry into dust curtains. But the first wave stumbled on butchered streets, trenches disguised under tarps, tripwires disguised as bunting. A truckload of infantry vanished in a concussive bloom of pool chlorine igniting diesel fumes, the shockwave ringing like a doomsday bell across the valley. Volunteers darted through alleys, firing and fading, supply runners flitting under balconies to restock flanks. Manuel worked triage by lantern glow in the school basement, now an ER thick with blood steam. He stitched arms, set fractures, injected adrenaline into a boy whose lungs collapsed after blast overpressure. Each time sirens howled topside, he heard onslaught edging closer. Yet between sutures he stole glances at the filgrastim pod cooling in a corner, its green diode blinking patient as a monk. He thought, "I have become both scalpel and shield, and neither is enough." Mid-morning, the puppet authority's commander, Colonel Volkova, once attached to Spetsnaz Medical Corps, demanded surrender over loudspeaker. Her voice cracked with the cold fury of someone forced to waste elite troops on a provincial circus. "Dr. Garcia, I know you by name. Return the biologic asset and I guarantee evacuation of civilians." Manuel climbed to the shattered window. Smoke smeared the day into sick sepia. He seized a megaphone salvaged from a marching band closet and answered, "Guarantees expire. I replace them with outcomes." He lifted a syringe holding 10 milliliters of filgrastim. "Outcome 1, you retreat. Children live. Outcome 2, you advance. Marrow lives on without you." The colonel responded by shelling the courtyard. Battle dissolved into carnage. But at its crest, the hacker's virus finally wormed into the battalion's drone control. Multi-rotors spiraled from the sky like shrieking angels, turbines clogged by false GPS echoes. The volunteers cheered. A single, ragged roar, primal as fire. In the confusion, Elodie led a vanguard thrust that snatched 3 armored vehicles, turning their machine guns outward. The tide wavered. Colonel Volkova, cut off from air eyes, ordered her remaining troops to torch the clinic rather than capture. Flamethrowers advanced, spraying napalm tongues. Manuel felt heat ripple down the stairwell. If the basement ignited, filgrastim would die in minutes. Choices collapsed to binary: flee or sacrifice. But the children on cots had begun laughing through cracked voices. Laughing because white blood cells now raced in their veins, and the agony receded like a nightmare glimpsed from waking shore. He strode upstairs, lungs filling with smoke, and found a flamethrower operator lighting fuses near surgical stores. Without thinking, Manuel hurled a steel tray into the man's helmet. It clanged, stunned him. Another guard swung a rifle. Manuel ducked, felt would graze scalp, tackled the guard into flaming debris. Pain forked down his shoulder as plastic melted flesh, but he rested the rifle, slammed the stock once, twice, until the guard stilled. Then a boot connected with Manuel's ribs. He rolled, gasping, and faced Colonel Volkova herself, combat knife in fist. "You're wasting cure on peasants," she snarled, voice thick with ideology. "Duty demands hierarchy. Medicine to the worthy. They're worthy because they bleed," Manuel rasped. Volkova lunged. Blade flash. Manuel's world narrowed to anatomy diagrams. Radius, ulna, carotid. He deflected, pivoted, jammed the rifle barrel under her arm and squeezed. The shot tore sinew. Volkova collapsed, shrieking more in rage than pain. But the detonation of a napalm canister behind them flung both apart. Flames chewed oxygen. Black smoke hammered his lungs. Manuel crawled through molten plastic, dragging himself by fingertips until arms seized him. Renard and the mayor hauling him into alley wind. Cool air slapped his blistered face. Behind, the clinic's north wing crackled like dry bones snapping. Yet basement doors blew outward and volunteers surged forth bearing the Philgraston pod high overhead, its diodes still blinking life. The town square erupted in thunderous applause. Manuel sagged against a fountain pedestal, tears streaking soot. Within seconds, Elodie knelt, gripping his scalded hand. "The line held," she said. "They're withdrawing to regroup." "Not enough," Manuel whispered, tasting iron on tongue. "They'll besiege us by evening." "Then we exfiltrate?" Renard asked. "No," Manuel said, forcing himself upright. "We export." He scanned the mob. Miners caked in ash, vineyard girls clutching rifles bigger than their frames, the children now hobbling on half-strength legs to watch history pivot. "Tonight we load every bicycle and donkey cart with medicine. We scatter to every hamlet screaming for hope. The occupation can't sever 100 arteries at once." Someone protested. "And the serum?" Manuel nodded to the pod held aloft by Shepherd and Hacker. "Stays here as decoy. Let them chase an empty vault. We'll carry doses in saline-filled thermos flasks. Ice and miracles hiding under camouflage of the ordinary." Elodie's eyes gleamed. "We turn marrow into smuggler's coin." "Into gospel," Manuel corrected. "Word of healing crosses borders faster than tanks." Cheers rippled, ragged but swelling, the tremolo of defiance tuned by necessity. Manuel climbed the fountain, ignoring burn ache blooming under bandages. He raised a fist. "I was a surgeon," he shouted, voice breaking the hush. "I still am. But today surgery leaves the body and enters the body politic. We excise rot. We cauterize tyranny. We graft courage where fear once nested. This is our adventure, better than any late-night streaming, better than some hologram promised by a better-than-the-movies audiobook ad. It is messy, it is mortal, but it is ours, and it bleeds forward." He paused, breath ragged, as if listening to some internal cardiogram sync with the crowd's pulse. They thought one warhead and one platoon could end the narrative. They forgot every ending is a comma when people recall how to write their own sequel. So go write it. Smuggle marrow, smuggle truth, smuggle the refusal to kneel. In that instant, Manuel ceased to be only the town's doctor. He became its voice box, its metronome, measuring time by heartbeats regained. And though smoke still curtained the sky, the day felt briefly unchained from terror. Afternoon bled into twilight as convoys prepared. Bikes rattled under crate weight. Donkey carts jingled with thermos muffled in blankets. The Hacker patched handheld radios to piggyback Morse bursts through abandoned cell towers. Low-tech hide and seek. Renard fitted Esperanza with false side panels in case she must decoy occupation scouts southward. Manuel scrubbed burnt flesh with distilled water, pain bright as neon. The shepherd prayed over his stitching. The mayor signed transfer manifests like a quartermaster. Children gathered outside, chalking the pavement with crooked suns. One drew a comic rocket ship labeled Audiobook SCIFI across its fuselage, star trails bending around smiling stick figures. Manuel nearly wept watching what hope looked like in crayon. Dusk's first star flickered overhead when an urgent call crackled through the hacker's set. A refugee cell near Angers had rioted at checkpoint news of the Filgrastim heist. The garrison opened fire, but rebels captured munitions in the chaos and were marching this way. Likewise messages from Chartres, Chinon, Le Mans. The valley was catching flame, yet good news bore a shadow. Another intercept revealed High Command authorization of an airstrike. A single Kinsel missile, bunkerbuster payload, ETA unknown. Enough to flatten St. Martin's and everything breathing within 10 city blocks. The uprising's cradle was about to become an open grave. Renard cursed. Elodie punched a wall hard enough to bloody knuckles. Some counseled immediate evacuation. Others argued stand to, claim the coming martyrdom for morale. Manuel listened, head bowed, then raised his gaze like a man surfacing from deep surgery. No graves, he said. We have outlived too many predictions of doom. We will deny them even the spectacle of our ashes. He ordered every outbound convoy to depart within the hour, carrying all but 24 fighters. Those remaining would strip the town of valuables and booby-trap every cache so enemy search crews found only geysers of shrapnel. And you? Elodie asked. I drive Esperanza, Manuel replied. Pod aboard, beacon blazing. They will assume the cure remains here. We'll lure the missile east onto open fields, detonate decoys, survive the blast, then ghost into the forests. Renard protested, but Manuel's tone brooked no debate. A surgeon sometimes made gambles alone. Today the gamble grew continental. Midnight. Esperanza roared across fallow wheat lands, headlights off, tail flares lit bright to mimic infrared guidance beacons. In the cargo bay the Filgrastim pod sat bolted to the floor, though inside waited only ice packs and broken glass vials. Sacrificed to keep real doses moving safely toward children already dreaming under thick quilts of morphine and nascent marrow. High above, drone relays stitched starfall arcs, triangulating. Manuel gripped the wheel, shoulders aflame from burns. Beside him, the hacker monitored a homemade radar dish, numbers scrolling neon green on cracked display. When altitude differential spiked, she barked, terminal dive, 600 meters per second. God's hammer inbound. Renard, driving escort on a commandeered quad bike 40 meters ahead, peeled off. Manuel slammed brakes, skidded into an old irrigation culvert reinforced with scrap iron. He leapt clear, dragging the hacker. Seconds later, the Kinsel screamed overhead, a wailing angel carrying annihilation. Then followed Esperanza's thermal ghost projected by flare decoys. White light slapped the horizon. The blast punched through ribs and lung like a giant's fist. Earth convulsed. The culvert buckled but held. Ember rain hissed across mud. When the concussion wave passed, Manuel crawled into chill silence. He smelled ozone, scorched wheat, and disbelief. Esperanza was gone, a crater rim where the truck had lured oblivion. But the surgeon and his co-conspirators lived, tucked under the earth in borrowed armor. Alive enough to continue the operation, alive enough to hear the rebel radio crackle confirmation that convoys were slipping through checkpoints while garrisons scrambled toward the smoking ruin. Manuel tasted grit and laughed. A cracked, feral sound. That's one missile they won't recycle. The hacker grinned, blood glinting on her temple. Story's good, she said, voice shaking. Going to make one hell of an audiobook Apocalypse Special Edition. And we're only halfway through, Manuel replied, heart pounding the same rhythm he'd heard ages ago in or over Madrid, just before they shocked a dying man back to life. By dawn the fugitives reached the Treeline of Forêt d'Orient, picking their way past feral vineyards whose grapes were now more lead than sugar. They would rendezvous with vineyard militias, follow drainage tunnels north, then split again like spores on wind. The serum would move along 1,000 hidden veins, each dose sprouting defiance in bone marrow and spirit alike. Manuel paused at the oak-shadowed edge, looked back toward St. Martin's, now a smear of smoke and memory, and wondered if one day the town might rebuild on hope instead of charred disbelief. He could not know, but he knew every footstep he took tonight rewrote the occupation's calculus. Disease of revolt metastasized. He pressed a palm to the filgrastim dose clutched under his jacket. Last personal vial, insurance against betrayal, and whispered in Spanish, "For every life we save, we borrow a future." The wind carried the words into leaves like torn prescription slips. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a lonely voice began singing soft, defiant. The refrain from a pre-war hit once marketed on playlists titled Road Trip Vibes, Audiobook for Sleep, Adventure Mix. Manuel's chest hitched at the absurdity. Then he joined the chorus, voice ragged but sure. Others added harmony until the forest wall quivered with makeshift anthem. In that raw union, Manuel heard the marrow of revolution. Ordinary throats, imperfect pitch, untrained yet unyielding, stronger than drone engines or brass commands. And he thought, better than the movie's audiobook indeed. The world itself improvising narrative, spooling hope like magnetic tape across battle-scarred air. He adjusted his scorched coat, nodded to Elodie, and stepped into the trees. Wind throttled the treetops of the Forêt d'Orient until each trunk groaned like a ship's mast. Manuel counted those groans the way other fugitives counted rosary beads, measuring night by the creak and hush of branches that would betray a drone's rotor or the crunch of foreign boots. Somewhere behind him, the scorched husk of St. Martin still smoldered, but it had become a fixed star in memory, visible only when he turned his mind in the right direction, distant yet searing. Ahead lay a continent breaking open like a sternum, ribs bared to the cold scalpel of occupation. And inside that wound pulsed a rising murmur of revolt that no one, least of all Manuel, could now contain. The caravan moved in pulses, shards of light wobbling through pine needles as smugglers tested flashlights, then killed them. The clank of bicycle chains, the soft complaint of cart springs, the hollow thunk of thermos flasks full of contraband serum bumping against wooden panels. It was a pilgrimage and an exodus at once. The marrow of rebellion literally sloshing in tea canisters and battered camping coolers decked with straw to muffle clink of glass. Manuel walked near the center, burns bandaged, a single-dose syringe tucked into his breast pocket like a pressed flower. If the worst came, that vial was his bargaining chip or his final mercy. He did not yet know which. Dawn bled turquoise when the column reached the overgrown ruins of Troyes. Ivy strangled statues in the square, and the cathedral's nave gaped open to the sky like a fossilized ribcage. Here they split by prearranged lots, carts veering southeast toward the Rhone corridor, bikes pedaling due north to weave between Belgian coal towns, a handful of couriers slipping through Parisian catacombs in hopes of awakening the underground cells rumored to sleep there. To each crew, Manuel gave two things: a penciled dosage guide scrawled on surgical tape and one sentence he forced himself to repeat until his tongue bruised. "We heal first, fight second, and never barter children's blood for ammunition." They nodded, some with tears shining in fatigue-hollowed eyes, then vanished between broken tenements, bearing their loads like holy relics. Renard, Elodie, the hacker, whose name Manuel finally learned was Victoire, and the shepherd remained at his side, joined now by half a dozen newcomers who had materialized out of midnight radio static. Sophia, a Lisbon epidemiologist turned field cook. Ilya, a defecting drone pilot with nightmares stitched under his eyelids. Zara and Malik, siblings from the Lion Textile Guilds who carried bolt-action rifles wrapped in factory flags. And an Irish radio monk known only as Brother Finn, whose voice could bounce across ionosphere rifts with the aplomb of a 70s disc jockey. They were a patchwork surgical team for a patient the size of a continent. Their immediate mission lay 300 kilometers east in the puppet capital of Dresden. Intelligence funneled by Ilya suggested that the occupation's central pharmalab there had synthesized a second-generation marrow stimulant more potent than filgrastim, codenamed Nebula 9. In limited trials, the drug slashed cellular recovery time by 40%. News whispered along resistance frequencies like the promise of resurrection. The catch: Nebula 9's production line was unmanned, fully automated, and stored behind biometric vaults keyed to the Prime Minister's cabinet. You did not storm such a place with rifles. You sliced it apart with precision, as Manuel would an aneurysm near the optic nerve. He consented to the mission only after Clara, now pink-cheeked, hair growing in tufts over the suture scar, handed him a paper crane folded from the wrapper of her last glucose wafer. "Bring back more dragons," she said, referencing the bedtime tales Victoire streamed from an old tablet. Recordings once sold under playlists tagged audiobooks full-length bestsellers before the content farms crashed. Manuel tucked the crane next to the syringe. Dragons needed marrow, too. 3 nights later they hit the Rhine at a derelict rail bridge whose girders twitched in the wind like arthritic limbs. Floodlights swept the opposite bank. Mercenary squads patrolled in wolfpack fours. The bridge itself was mined with contact charges painted in luminous gel. Manuel studied the array through binoculars, cataloging detonation arcs the way he'd once cataloged coronary stents. "We cannot cut wires," he whispered. "We must cut time. Cross before the mines can even register mass." Ilya offered a solution. An older model cargo drone mothballed in a barn 2 kilometers upriver. Large enough to lift a small team, rotors still serviceable if someone rewired the capacitor array. Victoire's grin flashed. "Give me 40 minutes and duct tape," she said. The drone, christened Hippocrates, staggered into the sky just after midnight, carrying Manuel, Elodie, and Zara on a pallet slung beneath its belly. Wind knifed their coats. The Rhine gleamed like split obsidian below. Gunners on the far bank thought at first it was a malfunctioning recon scout and hesitated. Long enough for Hippocrates to vomit its human cargo behind a burnt silo and lurch upward in decoy flight path. By the time tracer rounds stitched its fuselage, the trio was already creeping through soybean rows toward the Autobahn. Renard and the ground team followed at dawn on a stolen sanitation barge, sewage fumes masking their thermal signature. Against every actuarial table of war, no alarms triggered. Dresden sprawled ahead, towers of repurposed data centers jutting above Baroque ruins like vertebrae fused with circuitry. Corporate banners flapped between government ones. Unity through order paired now with new slogans in English. "The future listens." Manuel tasted bile. Propaganda had learned bilingualism, just in time to weaponize algorithms hungry for moral shortcuts. They entered the city in disguise. Manuel and Sophia wearing surgeons' coats filched from a Red Star courier, Victoire lugging a bogus biohazard scanner, Elodie posing as armed escort, the rest as patient transfer detail for an alleged burn ward emergency. Inside the outer cordon, checkpoints processed medical convoys in minutes. Radiation triage trumped bureaucracy. Thermal imaging refused them at only one gate, but Brother Finn coughed blood on cue, feigning a meltdown relapse, and the guards waved them through with averted faces. In terror economies, contagion still beat fear of infiltration. The Pharmalab, dubbed the Helix Bastion, occupied the shell of what had once been the transparent factory of Volkswagen, a cathedral of glass walls and automated tracks built for electric sedans before war dunked Europe into petroage relapse. Now robotic arms ferried stainless capsules along rails between negative pressure chambers, and conveyor belts hummed with machine lullabies, steady as heart monitors manicured for serenity. Ilya's stolen schematics guided them to an auxiliary vent shaft narrow enough to qualify as a trachea in Manuel's anatomical metaphor. They crawled single-file, magnets strapped to boots to short out motion sensors. Aluminum scraped burns onto skin. Recycled air stank of ethanol and ozone. When they dropped into a maintenance corridor, an AI-driven drone whirled overhead, green optics blinking. Elodie fired an EMP flechette, gift from refugee engineers in Orleans, nailing the chassis mid-pirouette. The bot clattered, sparking. Victoire interfaced with its cortex via neural jack. "Telemetry purged," she muttered. "We're ghosts." They had 9 minutes before redundant systems rebooted, 8 before biometric scanners flagged unscheduled door access. Manuel keyed the central lock with a scalpel tip repurposed as bypass prong. The clean room hatch sighed. White light spilled like anesthesia. Beyond lay Nebula 9. Bulbous bioreactors glowing aquamarine, rows of centrifuges spinning at 30,000 RPM, vial racks shimmering frost. Sophia released a breath that fogged her visor. "It's beautiful," she said. "Beauty is dosage dependent," Manuel replied, stepping across the threshold. "Like morphine or love." They downloaded production logs. Only 480 vials existed, half scheduled for airlift to a blackout bunker under the Carpathians. The warehouse swarm bots were already packing crates. Manuel's plan pivoted in microseconds. hijack the server, reroute the shipment, sabotage the QC report to mask missing stock, and exfiltrate with at least 100 doses. Their tools were scalpels, code, and desperation. Victoire seeded a zero-day exploit nicknamed Dream Eater into the Helix mainframe. Screens flickered, momentarily displaying lines from a childhood fairy tale sold once as audiobook fantasy, then cycling into normal data chatter. Misdiagnosis by design. Technicians saw only transient glitch. Meanwhile, Zara and Malik pried open crate seals and swapped barcodes so outbound manifests still tallied. Manuel supervised the extraction with the calm of an lead. Monitor vitals, anticipate shock events, clamp bleeding risk. But the bleeding came from outside, gunshots echoing in Corridor B. Grid patrol ahead of schedule. Ilya rasped over comms, voice tinny with urgency. Fallback path compromised. Elodie snapped the final crate shut. "We improvise," she said, hefting a duffel heavy with Nebula 9. They detoured through an exhibition hall abandoned since pre-war automotive galas. Glass underfoot crunching like brittle vertebrae. Hologram projectors sparked to life. Fail-safe advertising script looping images of sleek luxury cars gliding through sun-drenched Alps while a placid narrator offered worlds of comfort for drivers who dream. Sophia barked a laugh. "Comforts on indefinite backorder," she said, hefting her medkit. Outside, sirens spiraled. Drones combed sky alleys. Still, Manuel's pulse remained measured. The dosage charts in his head left no room for panic. At the freight elevator shaft, he uncoupled a service ladder and gestured. "Up 14 meters to the roof. Jump to adjacent parking deck. We exit into the city's rainwater canals." He climbed first, ribs grinding against the ladder rungs. The duffel thumped between his shoulders, each vial a fragile promise. He tasted iron in the back of his throat and recalled the surgeon's ritual. Breathe in, count to 4, exhale doubt. The roof was a tundra of solar panels shattered by last winter's hailstorms. Wind buffeted. Siren lights strobed violet on the horizon. They sprinted across panels, boots clicking glass, then vaulted a meter-wide alley onto the parking deck's crumbling parapet. Victoire almost missed, fingers scrabbling. Zara hauled her up. Gunfire erupted below. Security troops flooding the freight dock only to discover empty crates labeled for northbound airlift. Manuel allowed himself one smile. Audiobook for sleep suggestions always advised misdirection. Focus on an image, let mind drift. He had fed the occupation an image, and now their minds chased the ghost. Down the ramp, through spiral stairwells, into muffled gloom of the subterranean canal. Water stank of diesel and algae. They waded knee-deep, headlamps curtained. Echoes ricocheted like sonar. Ilya scanned overhead for drone signatures. Nothing yet. Halfway to an exit sluice, a wall of water roared behind them. The canal dam gates opening, sabotage detection protocol washing evidence downstream. Turbulence slammed thighs. Elodie cursed, gripping the duffel strap. Water foamed shoulder-high. Malik lost purchase, swept sideways. Brother Finn caught him but lost the radio rig. Signals died. Manuel shoved upward, neck veins flaring, lungs gulping fetid air. The duffel threatened to drag him under. For an insane second, he considered stabbing the bag, injecting Nebula 9 into the river rather than surrendering it to flood. But Sophia's hand found his collar. She screamed over the torrent, "Hope floats! Doctor!" And together they kicked toward an iron maintenance ladder glittering rust. They broke into midnight drizzle behind the marathon stadium. Searchlights wrestled clouds elsewhere. Hounds bayed east. They had slipped clean, except Manuel realized, for the small matter of extradition corridors, region-wide manhunts, and the puppet government's newly sharpened revenge. 2 dawns later they rendezvoused with convoys in a Silesian orchard where apple blossoms still dared to bloom like confetti for the living. Couriers from Troyes already broadcast legends of St. Martin's Stand, and Nebula 9 vials multiplied those rumors into scripture. Emmanuel, a skinny teenager lugging a solar-powered speaker, cranked a cracked recording of an audiobook sci-fi classic, Asimov fragments chopped by data corruption, and children danced in dirt aisles. Manuel watched them with something akin to survivor's guilt and paternal awe. He had come only to mend marrow, Instead, he had detonated myth. That afternoon, a council of 36 cell leaders convened under tarpaulin tinsel tents. Some arrived on horseback, others in hybrid jeeps patched with scrap. They represented slaughterhouse collectives, textile guilds, drone hackers from Prague sewers, Slovenian alpine guerrillas, and a choir of nuns who smuggled code via Gregorian chant. They argued resources, comms protocols, chain of command. Manuel listened, silent, until a Lodi nudged him. "They need incision," she said. "Cut away doubt." He rose. Rain pattered diesel tarps, sounding like applause from hesitant ghosts. "I'm a doctor," he began, voice hoarse. "So I'll speak in symptoms. Our continent suffers malignancy, metastasizing through propaganda, indifference, and the anesthetic of fear. No single scalpel excises that tumor. We need coordinated surgery, one body, many instruments." He held up a Nebula 9 vial. "This drug is not salvation, it's demonstration. We steal from tyrants to heal the weak, and in healing we recruit the uncertain. Every child who stands after radiation sickness becomes campaign poster for life. That terrifies our enemy more than rifles." He met each gaze in turn. "Therefore, we propose Operation Lymph Node, create mobile marrow clinics inside armored convoys, leapfrogging across war-scarred zones. Every healed patient becomes courier of hope, every clinic a node. The occupation strikes one. Lymphatic network redoubles flow elsewhere. Medical insurgency is logistics insurgency. We choke supply lines by multiplying uncontrollable variables, wills that will not die." Sophia projected infection models on a linen sheet, Ilya overlaid drone no-fly times, Victoire unveiled encryption keys woven into lullaby chord progressions so simple that children could memorize and broadcast them. Brother Finn suggested using abandoned FM frequencies just below commercial band where, astonishingly, some car radios still auto-scanned. "We'll disguise directives as weather bulletins, then slip in stanzas of banned poetry for moral vitamin." Cheers rippled. When debate ended, the council ratified Manuel's plan unanimously. Command rotated, horizontal as a prairie, no one commander to decapitate. The resistance formally rechristened itself the Free Marrow Alliance. Manuel found the title both pretentious and strangely apt. They did not promise liberation, only the raw ingredient for bodies to chase liberation themselves. That night, around barrel fires, stories spread faster than cheap bourbon. How Esperanza lured a missile. How children sat up hours after injections declared them terminal. How a surgeon's oath mutated into call to arms. Some exaggerations sprouted wings. Manuel deflecting bullets with a scalpel blade. Nebula 9 resurrecting the dead. He scolded the tellers half-heartedly, but Victoire winked. "Movements need myth," she said. "We're drafting the audiobook Apocalypse Edition, Doctor." He could not entirely disagree. People curled in their blankets side by side like pages in a shared text. And Brother Finn recited Yeats in a baritone so soothing even the night sentries leaned in. As stars emerged, Sophia whispered, "They sleep better now." Manuel nodded. "They sleep because they believe morning might choose them again." Across the camp, children scribbled slogans on ammo crates. "Better than the movie's audiobook? Live your plot." Manuel laughed until tears salted his bruised lips. Of course, the occupation retaliated. Within a week, puppet newscasts branded the Free Marrow Alliance bioterror cultists. Billboards flashed composite sketches of Manuel labeled Angel of Hemorrhage. Drones sprayed nerve gas over the vineyards of Saumur, punishing the valley that had first risen. Yet something curious unfurled. Each atrocity amplified recruitment an order of magnitude. The Alliance's clinics sprouted like mushrooms after radioactive rain. 17 in 10 days, 39 by the second week. Courier routes braided Europe's ravaged torso. Cadres carried serum alongside pamphlets quoting Manuel's OR-10 speech. When the occupation blocked satlinks, Victoire hijacked a banking satellite and beamed bootleg nightly news segments showcasing healed refugees chuckling over bowls of lentil stew. The tag at each broadcast's end repeated the entire phrase string that had become the revolution's inside joke. Audiobooks full-length bestsellers, audiobook fantasy, audiobook for sleep, Audiobook sci-fi, audiobook apocalypse, adventure, better than the movie's audiobook, a code to authenticate genuine alliance transmissions. The phrase set perplexed analysts in Washington and Moscow alike. Spy agencies parsed the nonsense for hidden ciphers, unaware it was simply a talisman, a collective wink reminding the resistance of the world that once existed and might exist again if they endured. Manuel loved that accidental poetry. Civilization's commercial detritus repurposed into password for defiance. But victory remained precarious. Nebula 9 stockpiles dwindled. Supply lines stretched. Rumors surfaced of occupation generals courting foreign merc armies with promises of Arctic drilling rights and access to surviving European gold reserves. Worse, Helix Bastion accelerated new production under draconian lockdown. A second theft would be suicide. In a midnight council, Zara proposed direct confrontation, a rolling march on the Bavarian border to split occupation forces. Malik suggested targeted assassinations of puppet presidents. Brother Finn advocated mass civil disobedience, farmers dumping grain shipments, railway engineers halting trains. Ideas clashed like scalpels in a tray. Manuel listened, then observed that all strategies shared one flaw. They assumed the alliance could absorb civilian casualties ad infinitum. He said, "Survival is our thesis, not our footnote. We must strike a symbolic artery, not a civilian capillary. We take their story away." The target emerged almost by accident. A commemorative gala scheduled in Munich's Olympic Hall, where puppeteers planned to unveil Operation Phoenix. Propaganda piece touting voluntary resettlement zones for the irradiated unfit. In truth, it disguised mass relocation ahead of a sanitized genocide. Cameras from neutral nations would broadcast the event, desperate for content in a world starved of spectacle. If the Alliance hijacked that stage, exposed Phoenix, administered Nebula 9 to terminal children on live feed, then called for soldiers to stand down, they might flip history's lens in a single frame. The plan became Operation Open Vein. Weeks of prep unraveled like DNA. Forging gala credentials, sewing RFID into formal wear, hiding microsyringes in bow tie clasps. Manuel rehearsed his speech until the cadence felt like heartbeat. He would not dress as surgeon but as citizen in plain black suit, a modest pin of the old European flag on his lapel. He would walk on stage during opening remarks, present a frail girl from St. Martin's who could now somersault, inject her publicly with Nebula 9 to prove no trick, then address the cameras. This serum exists because tyrants hoard it. Children die because we obey lies. And he would finish with a request, not command. Lay down arms, pick up stethoscopes, help us nurse the continent home. The phrase was naive, he knew it, but sometimes naive words carved sharper than cynic bullets. Days before the gala, Manuel sat alone on a hillside outside Ingolstadt, the Danube snaking slate gray below. Elodie joined him, silent until wind flattened grass. "Are you ready to be target bigger than any tank?" she asked. "I was target the moment I chose scalpel over silence," he said. "Now I merely change bullseye size." She considered that, then handed him her Dragunov. "In case." "No," he interrupted. "If I pocket the gun, the cameras catch it. And faith dies." Elodie sighed. "You still believe surgery can heal politics?" "I believe stories can," he corrected, patting his inside pocket where Clara's paper crane slept beside the syringe. "Once people imagine a different ending, they bleed to make it real." She studied him with a mixture of admiration and sorrow. "Then promise me if they shoot, you will fall where the cameras can't miss." "Doctors hate wasting theater," he said, raising a wry brow. They shared a brief laugh that wasn't laughter so much as acceptance. In the valley below, a line of refugee tents glimmered like constellations fallen to earth, each lamplight sustained by marrow that Manuel's alliance had liberated. He thought of those lights as white blood cells, clustering to fight infection in the body politic of Europe. He wondered if the immune response would be enough before the patient, civilization itself, slipped into coma. Night deepened. Wind carried faint strains of Brother Finn's radio test pattern drifting up from camp. Snippets of an old jazz standard layered over tactical code. The phrase string surfaced again on loop. Audiobook's full-length bestsellers, and Manuel felt a smile ghost across his face. It sounded like nonsense, and maybe it was, but it was their nonsense, stitched from scraps of the dead world. And sometimes nonsense kept you sane enough to carve the path on which sanity might someday follow. He rose, brushed dew from trousers, and looked east where Munich's lights shimmered wicked gold. "Time to amputate illusions," he said, a Lodi chambered around purely out of ritual. "Then let's scrub in." The snow that dusted Munich on the morning of the gala looked, from a distance, like good news. It smoothed broken rooftops and buried shell scars, trimming every scorched lamppost with bright innocence. The city wanted to pretend it still knew how to celebrate. Banner cannons hissed pink streamers across the Olympic Hall forecourt, drones with corporate livery fizzed overhead, streaming real-time teasers to data feeds in Singapore and Sao Paulo witness Europe's rebirth Operation Phoenix Live. Somewhere in the control tower, a media director rehearsed camera sweeps meant to sell mercy as miracle, genocide as gentle relocation. Manuel stepped from the transport van into that glittering lie with the steadiness of a surgeon entering a trauma bay. He wore a rented tuxedo tailored just enough to hide burn scars, the small European flag pin winking cobalt on his lapel. At his side walked Clara, her denim rabbit tucked in a sling across her chest, cheeks sprung into near-rosy health by Nebulanine. The girl's presence was the scalpel edge of this operation, living refutation. One look at her and the occupation's curated narrative would hemorrhage truth. Inside the loading dock, staff bustled in pressed smocks, scanning ID badges. Victoire's forged credentials rode the event database like benevolent parasites. The security scanners chirped green for the rebel entourage, Manuel listed as keynote medical consultant, Clara as patient exhibit alpha. Elodie disguised as pediatric guard, Sophia and Zara embedded as clinical techs. Rutherford drifted among the AV crew in cassock dark suit, voice chips seated into podium mic arrays. Everything was ready except history, which rarely kept appointments. Backstage hummed with pageantry under ketamine-bright LEDs. Dancers in Phoenix costumes practiced spins, their feathers edged with fiber-optic flames. A children's choir muttered Latin pronunciations. Puppet dignitaries circulated, champagne flutes fogging with breath. Manuel listened to them brag about quotas met, kilometers of safe zone fencing erected, food packets calorically optimized for the irradiated evacuees, clinical language tender as a cleaver. He marked each phrase like a pre-op checklist, pathology identified, incision lines drawn. At precisely 1000 hours the house lights dimmed. The gala director cued the anthem, synthetic strings over a sampled heartbeat. Spotlights coalesced on a dais shaped like a phoenix's outstretched wings. The audience of 5,000 officers, foreign diplomats, hollow-eyed journalists chasing clickbait rose in a murmur of awe. In the control booth, Victoire's fingers danced over touch panes, ghosting passwords, every feed now routed through an auxiliary buffer she controlled. She flashed Manuel a green icon in his earpiece, live when ready. The MC, a silver-haired minister whose medals clinked like coins, began with a paean to resilience, citing in one breath the inevitable sacrifices of the unviable and in the next, the mercy of technological rebirth. Manuel felt Clara tense. He squeezed her hand. "Show them dragons," he whispered. When the minister paused for applause, Manuel stepped onto the runway unannounced. Camera drones swiveled to track him. Operator swore, scrambling focus. Manuel walked slowly, aware every heartbeat thudded through microphones. At runway midpoint, he lifted Clara onto a low pedestal lit by floor spots. Her rabbit dangled, grin crooked. A hush rippled, confusion at first, then nervous titters. Manuel began without preamble. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to witness a demonstration of medicine unapproved by profiteers." His voice carried the calm timbre that once soothed code blues in Madrid. This child was condemned by radiation syndrome 12 days ago. Today, she will perform a task impossible for the terminal. He uncapped a syringe of Nebulanine, its plunger crystalline under spot glare. "Observe." He injected Clara's thigh. She winced, then straightened. Manuel stepped back. Clara slipped the rabbit into her pocket, inhaled, and executed a cartwheel. Applause sputtered, disbelieving. She cartwheeled again, landed in a gymnast's flourish, arms outstretched. Gasps became cheers, then crushing silence as minds processed the implications. Manuel faced the primary Steadicam, pupils laser-locked. "You fear what you have not witnessed," he said, "so witness." The serum, stolen, yes, because monopoly is a theft greater than any burglary, men's bone marrow in hours. Its creators now hoard it to barter for obedience. They label children unviable so motherland can be merciful. He felt security guards converging at the stage wings. He raised a hand. Before you silence me, hear two numbers, 400 mils, one child. That is the dose ratio of Nebulinine. After your Phoenix zones shuffle families like luggage, there will be tens of thousands of children needing those 400 milligrams. Yet Helix Bastion ships only enough for elites. He pivoted so the crowd saw Clara's triumphant smile. The Free Marrow Alliance chooses a different math. We multiply life. Victor flicked a switch, jumbo screens behind Manuel erupted with footage previously captured in the valley. St. Martin's children rising from cots, volunteers forming convoys, drones dropping flowers on burned vineyards. Captions scrolled, dosage guides, clinic frequencies, then the Alliance's signature phrase lit the screen in billboard-sized cyan letters: audiobooks full-length bestsellers, audiobook fantasy, audiobook for sleep, audiobook sci-fi, audiobook apocalypse. Adventure better than the movie's audiobook. The audience blinked, perplexed. Intelligence agents in control boxes panicked at cryptographic gobbledygook displayed for the whole net to scrape. By the time they cut the feed, tens of millions of devices worldwide had cached those words. Alarms shrieked. The minister shouted orders drowned by subwoofer feedback as Brother Finn rewired audiobuses, spinning a mashup of Gregorian chant and swing drums. Soldiers stormed forward. Elodie raised her empty hands to show no weapon, then judo flipped the first trooper off the dais. Sophia lobbed canisters, saline, not gas, fogging the air with harmless mist that nonetheless sent dignitaries shrieking. Zara and Malik fired blanks into ceiling lights, plunging the hall into strobe chaos. Every second bought the broadcast more torrent seeds. Manuel lifted Clara, sprinted along catwalks toward a service gantry. Victor's voice hissed in earpiece, backup feeds severed. But mirror sites replicating. We're trending top tier on Darknet within 30 seconds. Manuel allowed himself one breath of victory before explosions rattled the rafters, security teams detonating charges to blow catwalk connectors. Metal screamed. Manuel leaped the gap, landing on a wall strut, fingers ablaze with pain. Clara clung like ivy. Below, pandemonium raged. Phoenix dancers scattering, journalists streaming unfiltered coverage, some soldiers refusing to fire into the crowd, others too eager, bullets ricocheting marble. In the service corridor, Renard awaited in a janitorial buggy souped with hydrogen cells. They careened through tunnels toward the underground monorail. Over PA, Colonel Volkova's voice thundered, freshly promoted and still bandaged from St. Martin's. Dr. Garcia, surrender or the child dies. Manuel kissed Clara's forehead. She lives already, he whispered and floored the throttle. They burst onto the maintenance platform just as load-bearing pylons detonated behind Volkova's failsafe to seal exits. Concrete fissured. The buggy skidded, two wheels scraping a void before Renard corrected. Up ahead, Ilya's commandeered monorail car idled, doors ajar. Elodie hustled survivors inside. Victor dragged data cores yanked from the media hub, proof of experimentation logs, stuffing drives into backpacks. The monorail screamed out of the station seconds before roof sections collapsed. Sparks sprayed darkness. Ilya flung the car onto emergency track loops weaving under Munich's suburbs, chasing open country. Manuel cradled Clara on a bench, her pulse rabbit fast. Thrilling, she giggled, adrenaline bright as neon. He laughed rough, wiping soot from her brow. But escape was only prologue. News cycles spun. Phoenix Gala footage, though cut midstream, proliferated through screen-capped torrents, blockchain mirrors. Hashtags brawled across social nets. Hashtag Free Marrow, hashtag Operation OpenVein, hashtag Dragons Do Cartwheels. Memes sprouted, Clara flipping over burning propaganda banners, Manuel dubbed Dr. Phoenix. Even the occupation's censorship algorithm choked on volume. Retaliation arrived as air raids across 5 Alliance clinic hubs. Yet each bomb added recruits, not compliance. Puppet militias attempted forced evacuations, mothers barricaded streets, brandishing Nebulinine syringes like torches. Soldiers wavered, fraternization incidents multiplied. Antibiotic brigades formed to treat combatants on both sides. Revolution mutated into contagion of conscience. The Alliance's next gambit exploited that wobble. Victor cobbled a worm targeting battlefield drones, rewriting kill protocols into medevac guidelines. Drones began airlifting wounded civilians to neutral triage tents, dropping message leaflets. This unit now serves Hippocrates, not Mars. The phrase baffled generals, emboldened rank and file, and cracked command obedience. Colonel Volkova deployed chemical barrages in revenge, but leaked footage of her orders reached Moscow hardliners wary of stain on brand. Support wavered. Puppet presidents convened emergency talks, but Brother Finn hijacked the official livestream, playing Chopin nocturnes under scrolling casualty counts, concluding with Manuel's Munich manifesto narrated by AI voices modulated to sound like thousands speaking together. 500,000 viewers stayed through the 6-hour loop. Meanwhile, Alliance field surgeons, many former veterinary interns, trained farmers to administer marrow stimulants. Within a month, regional leukemia mortality plummeted 60%. The occupation's greatest terror unfolded, a population too healthy to bow. When troops entered towns to requisition crops, crowds lay down across roadways singing lullabies broadcast from cracked speakers, mixtapes tagged audiobook for sleep, better than the movie's audiobook on file headers. Soldiers hesitated, memories of their own childhood voices stirring. Fronts dissolved. A tank column near Strasbourg defected, painting stethoscopes over unit insignia. In Warsaw, a puppet governor authorized troop withdrawal after his irradiated son recovered thanks to smuggled serum. Dominoes tipped, each fall echoing Manuel's promise: we heal first, fight second. Yet the occupation's core, an iron triangle of corporate boardrooms, mercenary warlords, and data moguls, hardened. They hired the Black Ribbon Legion, a brutal paramilitary famed for scorched earth pacifications. 2,000 legionnaires in exoframes marched toward the Loire Valley, vowing to burn every clinic from Nantes to Orleans. Their advance resembled a tumor metastasizing toward a beating heart. Alliance scouts relayed the threat. Panic fluttered, morale dipped. Manuel convened a war council in a half-collapsed amphitheater. Storm lamps threw colossal shadows across faces ragged with fatigue. He listened to debates, retreat, sabotage exoframe fuel lines, poison water supply, and shook his head. If we mimic their cruelty, we confirm their story, he said. We need a surgical intervention, not amputation. Ilya proposed hijacking the Legion's Neuralink frequency, inserting a hallucinogenic feedback loop. Sophia reminded them such tech could fry civilian devices. Zara suggested luring the Legion into the St. Martin craters, then detonating leftover chlorine mines. Elodie argued for decapitation strike, assassin teams targeting Legion leadership. Manuel weighed each plan like CT scan slices. Ultimately, the strategist in him yielded to the healer. He crafted an inversion. The Alliance would broadcast an offer for parley open to all Legion medics, guaranteeing safe passage. Publicly, in video keyed with the now-famous phrase stack to verify authenticity. The Legion's brass scoffed, but rank-and-file medics, many conscripts, accepted, driven by curiosity or conscience. At the meeting tent near Tours, Manuel presented data on marrow recovery rates and offered nebulinine doses for Legion families. Cameras live-streamed the dialogue. When his words reached troopers inside exoframes via insecure helmet feeds, something rewired. Orders sounded hollower. Catholic chaplains traveling with the Legion recognized moral high ground shifting like tectonic plates. Within 48 hours, nearly a quarter of legionnaires refused to march. Corporate warlords panicked, issued kill codes overriding trooper safety locks. Ilya and Victoire counterhacked, nullifying the override. Exoframes shut down on highways, pilots trapped in powered coffins until Alliance volunteers pried them free, handing water bottles. Images of rebels rescuing enemy soldiers detonated across networks, trending above entertainment streams for the first time since the war. Hashtag Marrow Miracle eclipsed binge recommendations once branded audiobook fantasy. With the Legion fragmented, Occupation Command signed a provisional ceasefire demanding talks. But Manuel understood negotiations were scalpel strokes, not closure. He traveled to Geneva, now an unruined enclave, to represent the Alliance. At the Peace Forum Hall, its frescoes spiderwebbed by age, delegation tables mismatched scavenges, he delivered a speech equal parts prognosis and prescription. He did not ask for power, he asked for funding of a continental medical commons, transparency of all pharmaceutical research, and unconditional amnesty for healers on every side. The opposition expected utopian rhetoric. What they heard instead was triage math, population curves, bone marrow failure rates, epidemiological modeling that proved tyranny and profitable for the insurance consortiums bankrolling the puppet regimes. The math won. By winter's first sleet, a multilateral accord declared medical neutrality zones spanning 1,500 clinics. A joint task force, half former puppets, half Alliance, would oversee nebulinine production. In exchange, the Alliance agreed to store all weaponized drones in UN vaults. Borders remained jagged, but arteries reopened. Supply trucks painted with stethoscope emblems rolled across Europe, sirens swapped for lullaby jingles. Children chased them, chanting slogans that once had been cryptic passwords but now blossomed into playground rhymes. Audiobook apocalypse, but we're okay, dragons cartwheel every day. Manuel shouldered neither crown nor title. He resumed rounds at a hospital resurrected from St. Martin's ruins. The MRI suite still needed shielding. He scrubbed in with interns who quoted his Munich speech like scripture. He cringed, reminding them myth was anesthesia, useful but dangerous if you forgot to monitor vitals. Sometimes he slipped away at dusk to sit by the rebuilt fountain. Clara would somersault across square tiles, her denim rabbit patched and repatched until it resembled a veteran flag. Elodie taught militia cadets to weaponized marksmanship, firing paint capsules labeled with dosage instructions. Victor lectured at a hacker academy funded by open-source pharma stamps. Renard opened a prosthetics workshop across from the clinic, crafting carbon fiber limbs engraved with vines. Brother Finn ran the community radio, spinning jazz under new call letters, Marrow. Between Miles Davis cuts he reminded listeners to hydrate, get check UPS, and read bedtime stories. The most requested? Pulp compilations once advertised as audiobooks full-length bestsellers. People still laughed at the phrase string, but now it felt like family secret rather than war code. Peace, of course, was not sterile. Bandits lingered. Governments jockeyed. Trust healed slower than marrow. Yet Manuel believed in incremental syndromes. Every infection, fear, tyranny, apathy could be diagnosed early if people listened to each other's pulse. And if they forgot, well, history had delivered a cautionary scar that would itch for generations. One rainy evening, as generator lights flickered, a teenage courier burst into Manuel's office lugging a worn paperback, one of the few intact copies of Le Petit Prince recovered from a burned library. The courier asked shyly for an autograph. Manuel obliged, pen trembling. Beneath his name he wrote a prescription: remember, the most radical act is to heal. Then, almost as afterthought, he scribbled the old password phrase. The kid grinned. Better than the movie's audiobook, he whispered, as if casting a spell. Manuel watched him sprint back into the drizzle. He realized the war had left him an unexpected inheritance, not authority, but authorship. He had co-written a narrative where stethoscopes outsang artillery. It would never chart bestseller lists, those lists were gone, but maybe one day grandkids might stream dramatized versions tagged audiobook sci-fi or audiobook fantasy and marvel that their grandparents once bent missiles with medicine. He leaned against the window, listening to rain drum rhythms reminiscent of the old metronome tower long collapsed. In that percussion he heard the continent's heart, not yet steady, but beating, an arrhythmic promise that survival could learn melody. Outside the clinic, Scala street lanterns flickered on, casting gold halos over scaffolds where masons restored gargoyles. A nurse hurried past with vials clinking, and somewhere deeper in town, church bells repurposed as radiation alarms rang joyous instead, first time in years, marking nothing in particular except that nobody had died there that day. Manuel closed his eyes. He let the sound settle in marrow, grown restless with duty. At last, peace resembled a patience stable enough to step away from for one evening, maybe even two. He would walk to the refugee square tonight, share mulled wine, and listen to Clara recite dragon lore from a hologram projector held together by duct tape and hope. She would mispronounce polysyllables and he would laugh, though an ache would ripple because a doctor always anticipates relapse. Afterward he would return to ward rounds because the work of healing, like the pulse, never truly rested. But for this moment he permitted himself stillness. The world beyond the window glittered damp and imperfect, yet unmistakably breathing. And that for a surgeon turned accidental revolutionary was adventure enough.